Oh, good evening, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm so glad to be back. Did Kathy treat y'all all right last week?
Yeah, she did. She wants to pray for vengeance.
Pray for vengeance. Yeah, tell me more. 'Cause I haven't watched I haven't watched the recording. So
Yeah.
what y'all talk about?
Vengeance.
Vengeance. Yeah. Was it what you expected? Was it something different than you expected?
Not really, I read Psalms all the time.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of it I don't like, and that's one of them.
Well, what did Kathy say about vengeance? Do we remember? The whole week since then, had 6 weeks since then.
I was exhausted afterwards.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was Psalms 109.
Okay,
And I felt sorry for whoever wrote it.
yeah,
Because anybody that is that eaten up with hate and the desire for vengeance is not a very happy person. And they will not get what they want.
that's probably wise, yeah.
It was, I was, like I said, I told her Sunday, because I never changed that I was exhausted.
Yeah, yeah, Psalms will do that to you.
First, it needs our prayers, tremendous.
It's real stuff, really hard emotions in the Psalms.
On Sunday,
Are we reading Malachi on Sunday?
take our choice from the Old Testament,
Let me look. There's 2 options.
because now this week got smokes.
Smokes. You know, that was our
Actually spoke.
this past Saturday, we had the annual sporting event of the year, which is the Holiday Bowl, which is the football game in between the Presbyterian seminary. We got a whole rush of people coming in with this. I'll let y'all get settled in, because this is like half the class coming in now.
Those pictures are good on the website.
16. We are reading Isaiah. So it sounds like it's probably a good thing. Yeah. Hey, y'all. Well, I was saying this past, Jim was saying people get smoked in Malachi. And this past Saturday was the Holiday Bowl, and the mascot for the seminary at Southwest is the Third Bulls. The Third Bulls, you know what a Third Bull is?
No.
We don't really use them here, it's the incense swinger. But it's the Third Bulls, who's got horns on, yeah. It's pretty clever, it's pretty niche. It's pretty clever, but our upcoming fight song is Smoke 'em. It's Presbyterians is terrified in this sense, you know. I had no idea what we're going, so that we won. Yeah, down in one back to back wins the Holiday Bowl, yeah. We bring out all the weirdness, because, you know, I got there and I blessed the incense, we actually had real throwables on the field. And we had 2 seminarians in cassocks, like walking around the field, like swinging. So you're going for like, what is happening? No, generally speaking, the Presbyterian seminary has younger students, but fewer of them actually play the flag football game. So they come in really hot, and they always win the first half. But then we have a deep bench of mediocre players, which is better than a shallow bench of really fast players. Cause they get tired when we just score a bunch of touchdowns. This happens every year now. We had 3 different offensive lines. Yeah, we had a lot of people.
So why are they the Hawks?
Why are they the Hawks? Who knows? There was another great moment at the beginning of the game where we were getting ready to start playing and some birds started flying overhead. And the Presbyterians got really excited and they were like, the Hawks are here, we got Hawks. But they were black vultures. I didn't have a hard time.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, let's start our time together with the word prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. God, we give you thanks for this time to be together, to study your word, to do good work that exhausts and excites us. Be with us today as we learn about the Psalms of Thanksgiving, that we may learn to also give you thanks in our lives. Through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, so we made it. We made it through the Psalms of lament and vengeance and all the other tough ones, and now we've arrived at the Psalms of Thanksgiving, which are statistically, it's a smaller group of Psalms in the book of Psalms. We talked about how most of the Psalms in the Bible are laments, but we're going to talk about today, a lot of the laments actually do contain Thanksgiving. And there's kind of a formula and a balance to it that may not be apparent when we just think about the word laments. It sounds like it's just uniformly bad or difficult, but that's not quite the case. So a little bit of review. Psalms of lament are not just kind of like, it's not just complaining. It's not like, oh, I'm just lamenting all the time. Like I think we have a different connotation with that word now. But in a biblical sense, in an ancient sense, a lament is really like a plea for help from someone who can actually help you. You would make a formal lament to the king or to the ruler, and there were formal laments to other deities in the ancient world. But where the Psalms differ from those other laments, especially to other ancient deities, is that they're not like incantations. They're not spells that are sure to produce the result that you want. You look at laments to other deities in the ancient world, they're kind of combined with magical spells, and it seems like you're controlling the deity. But in the Psalms, it's really just, I believe you can help me, I trust you can help me, but it's up to you, God. It's not a attempt to control God, it is trusting God to be a faithful ruler and a faithful father. We talked about also how the king in the ancient world was not primarily someone who was, an executive branch ruler. They were primarily judicial. The king was the supreme judge of all the people, and they would arbitrate. They would spend most of their time arbitrating. They would spend a good amount of their time commanding armies and administrating, but most of the administration was lower level people. The king really was the figurehead for justice. That's why so many of the Psalms praise the king when the king rules justly and defends the poor and defends those who have been wronged, because that's the king's job. The king's job isn't to just sit on a throne and be powerful. The king's job is to actually rule well. And ruling well means being able to arbitrate people. And these psalms they can be both individual and collective, but most of them are collective. So Thanksgiving and lament are really closely related. They're both formal acts of worship or ritualized prayer. This is not just someone kind of, we have our extemporaneous prayer where we just kind of say what's on our heart with no real formality to the language, or less formality than what you would see in the Book of Common Prayer. And it was, I think, similar in ancient Israel. The Psalms represent the most formal, communal, shared prayers possible. People probably prayed extemporaneously. I think that's probably true, but the Psalms represent something that's really highly formalized, highly shared, and therefore is often accompanied with communal activities like going to the temple to offer sacrifice, or to offer thanksgiving, or communal processions, or days of mourning. They're about more than just the individual, even if the individual voice is used in the psalm. And we're going to see that a little bit today. So many of the lament psalms actually do contain thanksgivings within them. Most of the psalms of lament are pleas for help and then an anticipatory thanksgiving. Basically praising God in advance for the things that you hope God will do in your life, or just praising God for being God. It doesn't have to be tied to any kind of particular result. So some of these psalms are in the handout. We've got 6, 13, 22, 28. These are all psalms of lament that have thanksgivings within them. So one example is Psalm 6, Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger, do not punish me in your wrath. And then in between, we've got really, really deep. My spirit shakes with terror. I grow weary because of my groaning. Every night I drench my bed. My eyes are wasted with grief. Depart from me, evildoers. And then in verse 9, the Lord has heard my supplication. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies shall be confounded and quake with fear. They shall turn back from me. This is a pattern that we're going to see throughout a lot of the Psalms of Lament. And there's a really interesting theory that I'll offer to you in just a second. But these thanksgivings in the Psalms of Lament are offered in anticipation of deliverance and God's goodness and God's willingness to act in the lives of God's people. One of the ones we looked at 2 weeks ago was Psalm 126, which is a very, well-worn psalm. It's when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, then were we like those who dream. It's a mixture of both lament and thanksgiving because it's built on a knowledge of past salvation and in anticipation of that God of salvation acting the same way in the future. But there is a theory to how some of this might have functioned in this communal life of ancient Israel. The psalm we just read had this pattern. Psalm 28 has this pattern too, where it begins with a very traditional lament. O Lord, I call to you, my rock, do not be deaf to my cry. Lest if you do not hear me, I become like those who go down to the pit. Then there is a little bit more lament, and then between verse 6 and 7, there is a shift. Verse 7, blessed is the Lord, for he has heard the voice of my prayer. The Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in him and I have been helped. This is also in Psalm 55. It's in a lot of them. And there's a scholar named Bernard Anderson who was a mentor to my Old Testament professor. So I'm kind of 3 degrees removed from Bernard Anderson, or 2 degrees removed. And his theory is that when we see Psalms where this just like 180 happens, it's because it marks some particular shift in the ritual liturgical recitation of that psalm in the context of temple worship. So the people, or maybe a particular person, we don't really have records of this, but it's very possible that if someone individually sinned or had something that they needed deliverance from, they would come and recite the first portion of the psalm. And then the priest would assure them of God's forgiveness, the same way we do with our absolution. The priest doesn't forgive people, but the priest assures people that God's forgiveness comes to them. And then the person would continue with the psalm. Blessed be the Lord. This shift to thanksgiving happens after some kind of break in the liturgy. We see this pattern again in Psalm 55. Psalm 55 is much longer. It's about betrayal by a particular friend. Hear my prayer, O God, do not hide yourself from my petition. I'm shaken by the noise of the enemy, by the pressure of the wicked. And then in verse 14, we have a shift to, but it was you, a man after my own heart, my companion, my own familiar friend. And then there's this lament about this broken relationship that's troubling the psalmist so much. And then after verse 23, we think we might have one of these, liturgical roles of the priest in the psalm itself. So if the person is really talking to God and about God, because in verse 22 and 23, it's his speech is softer than butter, his words, this is about his enemies. And then in verse 24, there's this interjection. Cast your burden upon the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous stumble. we gotta really pay attention to what verbs and what direction is the text going to. Because this psalm begins, hear my prayer, O God. So we're addressing God first. And then this person kind of explains why they're addressing God. I would hasten to escape. I've done this. This is what's going on, God. Verse 10, swallow them up, O Lord. We have this I-you relationship. And then 17, the psalmist is kind of, verse 14, the focus then shifts to this other person who's betrayed him. And then it's a general address in verse 17. I will call upon God and the Lord will deliver me, not I will call upon you. I'm just saying I'm going to call upon God. And then we talk about God and the He as a third person. He will bring you safely back from the battle. The second person, third person, God who is enthroned of old. And then we talk about the companion a little bit more. And then verse 24, we see the your verb tense again, cast your burden upon the Lord. And that's why we think it's like this is the priest. Cast your burden upon the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous stumble. And then it shifts to it still uses you, but now the shift has gone back to God. But I will put my trust in you. So if we really follow, there's some psalms that take many turns, but we need to really follow the verb tenses in there. So that's Bernard Anderson's theory, that within the psalms themselves, especially the psalms of lament that contain thanksgivings, there was a communal sense. Because if you're praying this by yourself, you can pause, and there are other moments where there's a pause encouraged in the psalm, but we also need to imagine these texts as being really central to communal worship, not just someone's private prayer, because most people wouldn't have had a private copy of the Psalms in their homes. They might have memorized many of them, but they weren't sitting there reading them. Likewise, with this thanksgivings within laments, the formal songs of thanksgiving are usually in response to being delivered through something. The songs of thanksgiving are not, I thank you, God, for you have never let anything difficult happen in my life. It's you have delivered me through this thing, and so now I'm going to thank you. Just like a lament, the song of thanksgiving is not just a generalized thanking of God, it is tied to a ritual action, which is going to the temple to offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving. This is something you would do when delivered in your life or when something good happens to you. It's not one of the required sacrifices in the Old Testament law, but it is encouraged to go to the temple and offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving. And in fact, the word for, we'll get to that in a minute. But so that's the main distinction. The Psalms of Thanksgiving give thanks for being delivered through something, and it is usually personal or tied to a particular people's experience, like we have been delivered from our enemies. Not, it's not a generalized praise of God, because those are psalms of praise. Psalms of thanksgiving can be distinguished from psalms of praise because they're about what God has done in our lives. And psalms of praise are generally like these big, beautiful psalms praising God for his loving kindness to the whole world or to his act of creation. That's the distinction. It's not perfect. There are songs that blend the genres all over the place, but that's a helpful way for us to distinguish. The song of thanksgiving is tied to your personal experience with God and being delivered out of or through something that you weren't sure you were going to make it through, but now you're through it, and God has supported you all the while. Does that make sense? Any questions so far about Thanksgiving, lament, praise, thoughts? Okay, so within these psalms, there is one particular verb used to describe Thanksgiving. It's hodah, and it's a Hebrew word. Surprise. But it's a Hebrew word in the Psalms that is, like we said, tied to a particular ritual action. To give thanks is not just to be grateful. To give thanks in the sense of the Hebrew word that's translated Thanksgiving in Psalms is to offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving. And that's the word used in several of the Psalms, like Psalm 114, I believe, which we'll get to, 116, which we'll get to in a little bit. It also means to bless, to reverence, to acclaim God's name. And it is usually tied directly to some sort of religious observance. One carryover that is actually, it's not, it doesn't have the same, it's not as ubiquitous as it used to be in the Anglican tradition, but prior to the 1979 Book of Common Prayer, and in some places it's been revived as a practice, but there was a practice called the churching of women. Does this sound familiar to anyone? Yeah, the churching of women. It was the big celebratory formal re-entry of a woman into the life of the congregation after successfully surviving childbirth. And it was a communal way to give thanks that this very dangerous thing has been survived. It's still dangerous today, but it's less dangerous than it was 100 years ago or 200 years ago, when childbirth was really, really fraught with danger, and the first few years of a child's life were really, really, really fraught with danger. We still have this. We have Thanksgiving of a child, and we do it occasionally. We did it with Frida when she was born. We came and brought her to the front of the church and gave thanks to God. But that's kind of the ritual action I'm trying to get us to think about. That's what's happening with the Psalms of Thanksgiving. When you've been delivered from plague or pestilence or all the things that the Old Testament talks about, you're not guaranteed that those things aren't going to happen again in the future. But you know that for right now, you've been delivered, and so let's give thanks right now. That's kind of what's happening with the Psalms of Thanksgiving. So for the rest of our time together, we're just gonna have some fun doing close readings of these Psalms written on the back. What different translations of the Bible do we have in the room? Book of Common Prayer,
American Bible.
New American Bible,
NIV.
NIV. Oh, okay. Well, we got that one. I'm gonna pull out a couple. I tried to get it loaded onto the computer so that you can see it for yourself. I'll happily show this to anyone, anytime. But this is a software called Accordance. And there are free versions of it. There are free versions of it, but it is a Bible study software. And you can purchase different modules to put into it. Some of them become preloaded, and you can buy packages and they have sales and stuff, but similar to buying like a library of theological books, you can buy book studies, and you can put them in parallel with each other. So the scrolling is tied, so I've got 3 different translations right next to each other. And
That's just called book stuff.
it's called Accordance. ACCORDA, and yeah, it's just called Accordance. But this is the basic model. They have other things too, but so what I've got open here is oh, I see. That's fine. Okay. So So I've got open a couple of translations that should be interesting for us. I've got the ESV, which is just a nice English translation, a little more Protestant, a little more evangelical. I've got the Jewish Publication Society Bible from 1985, which is a Jewish translation of the text. Looking at their translations, you can really see how much liberty you have to take when you're translating Hebrew, because there are no definite articles in Hebrew, like the blank or he did this. It's the verbs contain within them what they're referencing and who they're referencing. So you have to, if you read the King James Version, for example, the King James Version will italicize any word that is not one for one in the original text. That's an interesting thing to read. If you read the King James and you see what's italicized, you see what they had to put in for it to make sense in English. The Jewish Publication Society doesn't do that. They do the same thing you have to do to just make it make sense in English. But they will change some of the verb tenses because it is kind of unclear in Hebrew sometimes if we're talking about the past or the present or the future, which is kind of cool. And then we've got the ESV, we've got the Jewish Publication Society, and then I've got the New English translation of the Septuagint. Has anyone ever heard of the Septuagint? Never has. It is an ancient translation of the Bible because towards the end of in the centuries leading up to Christ's birth, we've got the Persians and the Babylonians have had their way with the people of Israel, and then they have a little bit of time to not be under anyone, and then the Greeks come in, and the Greeks become the dominating empire in the area. They get conquered. The temple is desecrated for a little while. There's swine being offered on the altar at the temple, which is really, really awful. People are being pressured to Hellenize themselves to become more Greek culturally. Some people do that. They're seen as traitors. Some people don't. And they have various ways of not doing that. This is when books like Daniel come out, which is about a young Jewish man in a foreign country resisting pressure to bow down to idols and eat food that's not kosher. This is when these heroes emerge, because you need heroes who have withstood what you're withstanding right now. But the result of this is that, for the Jewish diaspora around the Mediterranean, Greek does become a really important language. It's tied to this cultural dominance, but it does become a lingua franca where if you learn Greek, you can communicate with lots of different people the same way Latin operated in medieval Europe, where if you spoke Latin, it didn't matter that you were from different cultures, you could share a language. Greek was that, and therefore people ended up, especially people who were not centered around the temple in Jerusalem, because there were Jews living all over who were not traveling to Jerusalem every week or every month to offer sacrifice. They were just living faithful lives in Alexandria in Egypt, or still in Babylon or other places. They started studying the scriptures in Greek because it was just easier to access Greek than it was to access Hebrew manuscripts. And you have to have scribes, you have to have lots of schools of people producing these texts for them to be. So the Hebrew Bible, we've had a revival of the Hebrew language in the last 100 years or so, especially with the promotion of the state of Israel for the Hebrew language. But before that, there was a wide array of ways that Jewish people studied the Bible, including Jewish Hebrew adjacent languages and Greek. So the Septuagint is the authoritative Greek translation of the Old Testament. But because language influences how you think and speak, it does contain interesting little tidbits from Greek thought and Greek philosophy so it's kind of a Greek flavored Old Testament. But so the New English translation of the Septuagint is a translation of a Greek translation of the Old Testament. But you learn interesting things. There's some really, really cool, the numeration is kind of different. So Psalm 34 is actually Psalm 33 in the Septuagint because it just had a different numbering system that predated modern Bibles. But I'll read from it and you can let me know if you like it or not. Do any of your Bibles have, for Psalm 34, do any of your Bibles have like an introductory line? Yeah, because these lines don't exist in the BCE. What does yours say, Lori?
It says of David, when he feigned madness before Abimelech, he forced him to be punished.
Yeah. When he feigned madness, that's what the Jewish Publication Society says too. Yeah, there's a couple different ones. Pertaining to David, when he changed his face. That's what the Septuagint says, when he changed his face, so changing your face must have meant feigning madness in Greek thought, I'm making myself look crazy. ESV says when he changed his behavior before God, does the NIV have one?
Says when he pretended to be insane.
Yeah. Okay. That's an interesting thing to know about this song, when he pretended to be crazy.
Easy words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of us don't have to pretend.
So it's not. Oh man, okay. So I will bless the Lord. So this is kind of a long one, but we can read it together. So this is the BCP translation. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall ever be in my mouth. I will glory in the Lord. Let the humble hear and rejoice. Proclaim with me the greatness of the Lord. Let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and delivered me out of all my terror. So this is that looking back perspective of Thanksgiving. Look upon him and be radiant, and let not your faces be ashamed. I called in my affliction, and the Lord heard me, and saved me from all my troubles. The angel of the Lord encompasses those who fear him, and he will deliver them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Happy are they who trust in him. I think that's all we'll read for that one, verse 1 through 8. That taste and see verse is probably the most well-known verse from that psalm. Yeah, okay.
So is the accordance part of the Psalms, it's just certain numbers of them, or is it something?
So accordance is just like a software. It's just like the Bible app or something. And accordances is a type of book. There are accordances that allow you to look thematically at the text. I think it's what accordances. It has like an index where it's like fear. Here's all the verses that talk about fear, and here's all the verses that talk about jealousy more. Yeah. But I can show it to you on the screen. Here's what the Septuagint says. I will bless the Lord at every opportunity. Continually shall his praise be in my mouth. In the Lord my soul shall be commended. Let the meek hear and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he hearkened me, and from all my sojournings he rescued me. Come to him and be enlightened, and your faces shall never be put to shame. This poor one cried, and the Lord listened to him. To get a sense that the author's talking about himself there. And from all his afflictions he saved him. And the angel, so this is actually longer too, it has more verses. And then it has, oh, taste and see that the Lord is kind. Happy the man who hopes in him. Taste and see seems to be the overwhelming way to translate that. There's not really, is the NIV different at all?
No, however, back in verse 2. Instead of humble or meek, it says, let the afflicted hear and rejoice.
Mhm.
It's probably more suffering than just
Yeah,
the simple,
humble and meek.
humble people.
Well, let's see. Another thing you can do, this is probably one of my favorite features of this software, if you have the right stuff. You can do what's called a key number search. And what that does is it allows you to search for every time that particular original language word is used. And then you can see every way that it's translated elsewhere in the Bible. Because some words are translated drastically different based on context and other things. Yeah, so this word is used 25 times in the Old Testament. Meek, poor, afflicted, poor, humble, poor. So poor, afflicted, humble, and meek are the ways that it's translated. So it could mean all of them, based on context or what's happening. But in Hebrew, it does mean all of them, and that shows you how hard it is to translate some words. I think I preached a sermon on Jeremiah. As for me in my house, I will serve the Lord. That word serve is translated elsewhere in the Old Testament as worship, pray, work, and till. And like in the creation story, it's like Adam will have to till the ground. So work, worship, till, serve is all somehow one word in Hebrew. So prayer is not like worship is not a passive thing. You know, that's the sense you get from that. Anything else stand out?
Yep.
Yeah.
I was interested in verse 5, look upon him and be enlightened.
Be enlightened.
And in the Book of Common Prayer, it says, look upon him and be radiant.
Be radiant.
And they don't.
That's nice.
It made me think of what you said about how in the Greek, they sort of Greekize the meaning of the
Enlightened.
psalm. And
Radiant.
to
Yeah.
me, that's, enlightened is a different way of thinking than radiant.
Yeah. Let's see. So it's a much more rare word in the Old Testament. It only occurs 5 times. There are some words that only occur once, and so we really just have to guess sometimes what those words mean. But this word occurs 5 times in the Old Testament. Once in the Psalms, once in Isaiah, twice in Jeremiah, and once in Micah. So it's an overwhelmingly prophetic word. Radiant. It's a little footnote. Okay, so it's just connecting it to that one. Okay. In Isaiah and in Jeremiah and in Micah, it's translated as flow.
That felt good.
In the context of, and all the nations shall flow to it. Well, it being Jerusalem. So those who look to him are radiant, flow, enlightened, enriched is kind of what is the word that's coming to mind for me. The nations shall flow to this light. Because there's that sense that the Jerusalem is the light of the world. It's this place through which all the nations of the world are blessed. Interesting. So just reading Micah or Jeremiah, you're like, oh yeah, flow. But now we know that that flow means like flow, light, enriching, enlightened, radiance. Really cool. Anytime a word stands out like that, just let me know and we'll do a little search and see what it looks like elsewhere. This is another interesting linguistic thing. It appears to be the same in Hebrew as it is in other languages. There is a connection between tasting in Hebrew and perceiving. Like taste and knowledge, it can be translated either way. So looking at that word, let's see. Taste and see. Let's try to see where else that tasted, tasted, tasted. Proverbs, she perceives. Usually it's tasted, but yeah, there's the sense that tasting is this grasping. You know, once you've tasted something, it's just in you. And that is also the same in Latin, and now the same, much more farther removed in Spanish. Has anyone ever talked to you about this, Chris? The connection. Yeah. So sabor, flavor. What's the Spanish word for wisdom?
Oh, sabiduría.
Yeah, sabiduría, saber, to know, yeah. So there's this connection between flavor and knowing in Spanish because its root language is Latin, which also connects tasting and wisdom. This is where we get, because in Latin, like sapienza is wisdom, and it's the same as, just like someone who's tasted a lot of things. Someone who has a good taste. Homo sapiens, it's the wise man, but it's also the man who eats a lot, So that's interesting. Okay,
Anthony,
yeah,
I was looking in this New American Bible, Catholic Bible, to see where do they have taste and see in this chapter, and they do not have it.
Okay.
Instead, they have learn to savor.
learn to savor how good, that's good, yeah, because that connects the learning, it's. There is a really, later on, these things become much more ethereal and hypothetical, but. I mean, Latin connects knowing to eating. Hebrew connects knowing to eating, Spanish now, but it's not as strong of a connection anymore because we're thousands of years removed from these words emerging. But still, it's kind of nice.
And when you savor something, you kind of think about what it was that you tasted and put it in your mouth, just don't, like, military guys just.
It's not just throwing it back, yeah.
Wait, the rest of us smell our money.
That's good.
Think about it, smell.
Yeah, Greek has a few words for seed, that reflect some of this connection, in John. When the disciples come to the empty tomb, several of them, look at the tomb, but they're not perceiving anything, they're just kind of looking at it, and then Mary perceives that the Lord is risen. And it's a different word for her. And then the beloved disciple also perceives and then runs away and goes to share good news.
That would be understanding.
Yeah, exactly. But in most of our translations of that Greek, it's just variations of the word see. It's like, and then Mary looked in, and then she comes back and says, I have seen the Lord. It's not the word for just looking at something, it's the word for understanding. Yeah, it's bigger. Okay. Let's skip Psalm 100. So Psalm 100 is used a lot, especially if you're a daily office kind of person. Psalm 100 is one of the opening psalms in morning prayer. Come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us shout for joy to the rock of our salvation. It has been set to music so many times. It's beautiful. And it's also probably pretty old because it talks about God as oh, no, this is the Jubilee. I'm thinking of the the 90, yeah. So 100 is be joyful in the Lord. Who? All you lands. All the lands, be joyful in the Lord. Serve the Lord with gladness and come before his presence with a song. Know this, the Lord himself is God. He himself has made us and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. So we have this poetic, imaginative language for somehow people and sheep at the same time, which is also the imagery of Psalm 23. Enter his gates with thanksgiving, go into his courts with praise, give thanks to him and call upon his name, for the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and his faithfulness endures from age to age. So this is a song of thanksgiving that is much more universal and general. It's not the Lord is good because he has delivered me. It's just the Lord is good. Mercy is everlasting, and his faithfulness endures from age to age. Anything else stand out in this one before we move on?
Mine says processional.
Yeah, it probably was processional, and yeah, what did he say? Yeah,
He's just saying in morning prayer before they did, the Eucharist every Sunday.
Uh,
Back 3,000 years ago, we used to sing it in morning prayer.
mhm.
The two go
Yeah.
And the words for a little bit.
Yeah, there's some really nice settings of this and hymnals still, you can still find them there.
It translated the word. What's now good in this translation used to be gracious, both words
Mhm.
gracious.
Gracious, that's good.
And that's, I don't know, that's just, it's such a hospitable word. The word good is so over.
Right.
Used, you almost would think that would be
Yeah, good is, it's, yeah, it's a little,
Austin's.
Septuagint means kind. The Lord is kind, that's a different kind of, right, like a gracious emotional language of good. It's not good in this sort of removed sense over here. It's good because of the relationship. Lord is good, yeah, these other ones is good too. Okay. Now we've got Psalm 116, which I think I identified in one of the early weeks of this class that is, I think it's my favorite probably. At least right now. Mostly because I just have really strong associations with it. It's the Maundy Thursday psalm. And I can recall really powerful Maundy Thursday services where I'm just like, that was part of it. And I just remember it so well. I got to sing this psalm in the choir at St. John the Divine in New York City for Maundy Thursday. That's a really strong association. I've got a friend who's a deacon who his kind of life verse is in this psalm too. And it's just really beautiful. So I'll read the BCP version and we'll see what we can learn about it. I love the Lord because he has heard the voice of my supplication, because he has inclined his ear to me whenever I called upon him. The cords of death entangled me. The grip of the grave took hold of me. I came to grief and sorrow. Then I called upon the name of the Lord. O Lord, I pray you save my life. Gracious is the Lord and righteous. Our God is full of compassion. The Lord watches over the innocent. I was brought very low, and he helped me. Turn again to your rest, O my soul, for the Lord has treated you well. For you have rescued my life from death, my eyes from tears, and my feet from stumbling. I will walk in the presence of the Lord, in the land of the living. I believed even when I said, I have been brought very low. In my distress, I said, no one can be trusted. How shall I repay the Lord for all the good things he has done for me? I will lift up the cup of salvation and call upon the name of the Lord. I will fulfill my vows to the Lord in the presence of all his people. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his servants. O Lord, I am your servant. I am your servant and a child of your handmaid. You have freed me from my bonds. I will offer you the sacrifice of thanksgiving and call upon the name of the Lord. I will fulfill my vows to the Lord in the presence of all his people, in the courts of the Lord's house, in the midst of you, O Jerusalem. Hallelujah. So what do we notice in that? We definitely see the communal nature of Thanksgiving. Because immediately after he asks, how shall I repay the Lord for all the good things he has done for me? Let me list a whole bunch of communal things that I can do, like I will fulfill my vows to the Lord in the presence of all his people. I will offer you the sacrifice of thanksgiving. In the courts of the Lord's house, in the midst of you, O Jerusalem. Hallelujah. That's the response that the psalmist is going to give to this sort of grace. Any words or phrases stand out?
Verse 11,
Mhm.
I'm reading from the NIV, and in my alarm, I said that everyone is alive now.
Well,
But it's
What else?
It seems a listing of God's attributes. And that's what they're thankful.
Yeah. Gracious, compassion, watchful.
Able to say,
Looking at the verbs is a good way to dive into the psalm.
It's like he's giving examples for all the good things, all the good qualities of the Lord. For the Lord has treated you well. You have rescued my house from my life from death, my house from tears.
Yeah, this verse 9 is calling back to the Psalm of Lament. There's this relationship between Thanksgiving and lament. I believed, even when I said, I have been brought very low. I've always loved verse 13 and 14. The relationship between the two of them. Because it goes from impersonal to personal. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his servants. O Lord, I am your servant.
In my translation, 14 and 18 are identical.
Yep. 14, there's an 18.
There is no 18.
Well, this one goes to 19.
Interesting.
I think it's just.
In verse, okay, so Psalm 116, let's see what the other translations do. And this Septuagint, this is the 114th Psalm. And it's the structures is, oh, I see, it's two Psalms together. Gotcha. So 114 and 115 are what we have as 116. So I found a recording of that of when we sang that song. Let me see what I played. And when you're conducting psalms, it's really to get any kind of flow and movement, it's really up to the conductor and the choir because it's just a repeating chant. So the conductor really has to, if you want it to be great, you rehearse it at a time, you practice your dynamics and see, where's the shift gonna happen. And he was really, really excellent, and he put a really pregnant pause in between verses 13 and 14. Where the psalmist realizes or claims their identity as I am your servant. It's like, I don't know. Okay, so this is verse 12. So I think You know, we have some really great chants like that. I don't think it's that far off from how this would have been used. And we've already seen how there are breaks in the songs where the priest might interject, or the people might say one part and the priest might say the next part, and it's, you know, it's liturgy, it's a communal ritual way of living life together and processing what we're experiencing. I think the song probably would have been sung very dramatically in the temple. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but we'll have one more session next week. Where we'll look at those hymns of praise that we mentioned a little bit, the Psalms, there's some creation stories in the Psalms that are really powerful and interesting. And we'll close our time together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.